It's time to get warm and fuzzy today on Locked On Colts as we dig into award season. Who's been the best of the best on the team and why? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is so much fun and it's easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections that are available. All you do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, then you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love PrizePicks at Locked On Colts, and we know that you guys will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This is Jake Arthur of HorseshoeHuddle.com, and we're both without our professional better halves today, but I'm joined by none other than Destin Adams of Stampede Blue and the Saddle Up podcast. What's up, brother?
I'm doing good. I mean, you don't have Zach, I don't have Rashad. I guess doing math here, I guess we still equal one show if we do the minus. So it's kind of a crossover, kind of just a substitution for the day.
Yep, exactly. It's the Colts bye week, so we don't have a crossover with anyone in network. So we said, hey, we're getting Destin and Rashad back, a.k.a. just Destin. I won't roast you as bad as Zach did the last time you guessed it, though. I promise that much.
Yeah, I rolled with it. I'm okay. I'm okay with it.
All good. All right, so today it's the Colts bye week, like we just mentioned, but with 13 weeks under their belt, we know plenty about this Colts team. We're going to break out the yearbooks and declare some superlatives and award winners for the team. Things like MVP, Rookies of the Year, and ultimately the biggest things that we're looking forward to in the final 4 games. Now, obviously, this has been a very disappointing season, so guys who you would have thought would have been particular award winners, that's not going to be the case. Destin and I were actually just talking off air before here that some of these were pretty tough choices. We're gonna go with the bigger awards first. I just really want to know who your MVP is so far.
I'm expecting that we're going to have some duplicates. Some of these, like you said, some of these were hard to pick. The MVP wasn't one of the ones for me. I think the most consistent, high-performing player on this Colts team this past year is for the MVP. Usually for MVP, you see a quarterback. Usually for MVP, you see an offensive player. I couldn't go that route on this Colts team, and I went Grover Stewart. I think Big Grove has just been consistently the best player on this Colts team this season. I think he consistently has shown up. He's consistently making plays. And on top of that, I just feel like this has been a career year for Grover. And I don't know if I can say that for many other Colts players this year. There are a couple others, but Grover is going to get the MVP for me.
I so much love that pick, and because it's normally an offensive award, a quarterback award. You just can't do that this year. Like, there's no one on the offense who I'm like, oh yeah, they would. The Colts couldn't live without them, because really the Colts have been losing all year because of their offense.
So they've had to live without multiples of them.
Exactly. Guys have missed games. So I also had Grover Stewart, but I actually have co-MVPs like McNair and Peyton Manning. It's Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. I couldn't outweigh one versus the other. So Grover Stewart for all the reasons you mentioned. But DeForest Buckner, I don't think either of those guys, they're both tremendous elite players, but I think they bring out the best in each other. You know, they need each other right there next, side by side. DeForest Buckner has had, you probably can't count his amount of injuries on 2 hands, but he hasn't missed a game. He had one game where he was on a small snap count, but he's been there through it all. We've seen how bad it can look before when he's not in the lineup. And he's been out there regardless of the injury. neck, ribs, wrist, elbow. He's playing with that giant J.J. Watt thing, He had that illness that has been knocking some guys out lately. So I couldn't decide between the two. My MVP, the defensive tackles. Moving on to Offensive Player of the Year, I'm curious if we both wound up with the same one on this one, too. Who was yours?
I went Jonathan Taylor. At the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor has the most single yards, whether it's a receiver or running back, amongst the team, as well as even though only scoring 4 times, that's still tied, I believe, for the most individual touchdowns on the season as well. So I went ahead and went Jonathan Taylor for Offensive Player of the Year. And this is an award you sometimes see a running back win. Just because they won't give Offensive Player of the Year and the MVP to the same person.
Yeah, so mine came down to Taylor versus Michael Pittman Jr. Taylor's missed some time this year. They've won a game without him. They beat the Broncos, and he's had some bad moments. His fumble issues have come back this year, and he's had some really untimely ones. Michael Pittman Jr. He missed just the one game I think against the Jaguars. He too has had one or two bad moments. He had that drop against the Patriots. But I had to say Pittman Jr., for the most part, his hands have been bear traps. He comes away with the toughest catches on the team. It seems like he goes over the middle. No receiver gets hit as hard as consistently as he does, and he tends to hang on to the ball. So my Offensive Player of the Year, Michael Pittman Jr., on pace for another career year after kind of breaking out last year. So Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor are players of the year, as I'm sure most of you guys would probably agree. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, who is your defensive player of the year? Of course, we already picked our favorite defenders as the MVP. So is there someone else that you got there?
So you mentioned DeForest Buckner as your co-MVP. I didn't end up going him for Defensive Player of the Year just because I didn't want to go two interior lineman guys. I ended up going Stephon Gilmore at the cornerback position. I just think there was a lot of up in the air about can Gilmore still play at a high level after coming off his stint in Carolina, where he was a little up and down after his New England stint? And I think just Stephon Gilmore has shown that he still has it in the tank. I think he has gone out there for the most part. He has been as advertised as a free agency signing for the Colts. And I think on the back end, he has just led a very impressive group as enduring pass coverage against good quarterbacks this year. He's had big plays against big guys, and I think Stephon Gilmore has just elevated this defense to a level that we hadn't seen in years past, and that's why I went ahead and gave him Defensive Player of the Year. And he's won the real thing before, so he's
Yeah,
used to it.
exactly. Yeah, that's nothing new for him. That was my pick as well. Um, he didn't have a poor image coming into the Colts, but people were starting to think getting older, getting injured, he's not the same guy. He looked a lot closer to the perennial Pro Bowler that he was in New England this year than he has the banged up guy in Carolina. So that was my pick as well. He's been very valuable. You could have made a case for him as MVP as well. He has been the clincher in at least 3 of the Colts wins, forced the pick against Kansas City, had the pick in the pass breakup against Denver, had the one a couple weeks ago. So yeah, he's been so important, and there's a few games I don't know that they win without him.
I mean,
I look at
for sure Denver.
Yeah, Denver they probably don't win without him. The Chiefs, you got to think Mahomes can march them down the field and get a score. The Raiders, he played Devontae Adams pretty well. He's been involved in some pretty big moments, and I can't imagine if the whole season would have gone and it was Kenny Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, Brandon Faison as the guys instead of Gilmore. I think they would have been a lot worse shape there.
Man,
Nothing against all those
Brandon
guys as a
Faison.
group.
You said Brandon Faison's name, so someone somewhere has turned off the podcast if I had to guess. But also, I mean, we're saying all these things and all these wins that Stephon Gilmore has himself been a big part of. So now the tank community in the Colts Nation, they may not like Gilmore as much after this. They're like, man, three of these 4 wins come back to Stephon Gilmore himself.
Exactly. They could only have one win under their belt outside of him. And then here's a big one: comeback player of the year.
I have a feeling we're going to be very similar places on this one as well. I went Paris Campbell. I think this is a comeback player of the year that is multiple years in the running, in a sense, where it wasn't just an injury last year that he was coming back from. He's just had a injury plagued career that he was coming back to form, and it's on a contract year. Paris Campbell had no guarantees on where he would play next year, and if it would be anywhere. If he gets hurt again, who knows what that next opportunity is, if there is one. And I think Paris Campbell has shown that he can be a reliable piece in a receiving room. And Paris Campbell's numbers this year would have been receiver number 2 on last year's Colts team. So I think that warrants Paris Campbell being the comeback player of the year. He does have the second most touchdowns of any Colts offensive player on the team this year with 3, only behind Jonathan Taylor.
And Jelani Woods.
And Jelani Woods, my bad.
No, but yeah, that's my pick too. Paris Campbell, second on the team in receptions and targets. If he was ever thrown the ball downfield, he would be second on the team in receiving yards as well. He's only 13 behind Alec Pierce, and Alec Pierce gets the ball downfield almost exclusively. So really, Paris Campbell has firmly been wide receiver 2 throughout the season. He's been able to stay healthy. That's obviously been the biggest thing. Because, I mean, after a while, you get tired of hearing everyone talk about his injuries. The guy can't post anything on Twitter without being called Mr. Glass or anything. So this has been awesome. It's kind of like seeing Malik Hooker have that great game against the Colts last week. Like, guys who just were kind of dealt a bad hand and they're rebounding now. And for Paris Campbell, this is going to make a difference between millions of dollars. So that's exciting for him. He's now got every reason to be able to come back to Indy if he wants to this offseason. And before we move on and look at some of the younger guys in the awards that they're going to clean up with, today's episode is sponsored by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find a sneak peek of Block Forever, available on Locked On NFL right now. Block Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. He gives football fans an insider's look at the game through the eyes of the greatest players and personalities of all time. You'll hear Christian McCaffrey talk about his love-hate relationship with fantasy football, and Juju Smith-Schuster give his most honest opinions on other players and positions in the league. Head over to Locked On NFL for a sneak peek of Block Forever, or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcast. Available everywhere now. Audible, get in the game. All right, so Destin, this one's kind of a 2-horse race, but I think the winner is fairly obvious. Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I went Alec Pierce. I'm a big Alec Pierce guy. I've kind of coined the phrase Alec freaking Pierce every time he makes a big play on Twitter. So I'm a big Alec Pierce guy. I think he gets the edge over a guy like Jelani Woods, who I have coming in second for me, just because of how often he is used. I think you could even throw in arguments for other guys, or at least other guy that I don't want to say a name just in case you do pick him. But I think there's multiple opportunities for this offensive group to be good down the road and make this where you look back on it like who was the best offensive player from this class of rookies for the Colts, and it's a harder decision. But I think Alec Pierce has just seen such bigger usage. He has the game winner against Jacksonville. It's going to be the biggest moment of maybe any of the rookie class members, outside of if you put up Rodney Thomas's breakup against Patrick Mahomes as a rookie moment. But yeah, I went ahead and went receiver out of Cincinnati, Alec Pierce.
I like it. That was my pick as well, and I lied it. I guess it's actually a 3-horse race. Pierce, Woods, and Bernhard Raimann. You could throw him in there as well. He's the new starter at left tackle. And outside of some not so great moments, he's played pretty well overall. He's gotten consistently better. Given them hope that maybe he could at least be their starter next year anyway. But
who knows where Bernhard Raimann is if he starts week 1 and has those learning curves and just starts growing instead of just being thrown in week 10. Just a lot of question marks that we'll have to come back to eventually. But Bernhard Raimann, I'm happy that he's starting to get more consistent and get some more reps under his belt.
That's how you want to find your starter, right? Because everyone else is so bad that you just have to fall into someone else.
Perfect formula. No flaws in that.
Oh, yeah. So Alec Pierce, honestly, the hard work has stood out to me. He's worked relentlessly with Reggie Wayne during the summer. You were there at training camp as well. You saw so much work against Stephon Gilmore, and they really brought this guy around well. His chemistry with Matt Ryan still has to get better because they essentially have no chemistry short to intermediate. It's all downfield stuff. So that part of his game, we don't know if it's developed yet because he's just not on the same page with Matt Ryan. Arm strength is part of it, and I think rookies understanding spacing and just small nuances like that is probably part of it. But moving on, defensive rookie of the year, and I don't know about you, but my pick is someone who I absolutely would not have thought before the season.
Yeah, I'm going to guess this is a similar one. I went ahead and put Rodney Thomas, a guy who has played significantly more reps than I think anyone would have predicted, probably even himself looking back at training camp. I remember all through training camp, the guy that everyone wanted to mention from this class, maybe overall, was Nick Cross, and just how good he looked in training camp and how much they thought they were going to use him. And outside of that first couple of weeks, you just haven't heard Nick Cross's name. Part of the reason being that Rodney Thomas has played so well when Julian Blackmon went down, had that big play, like I mentioned earlier, against Patrick Mahomes, the little tipped pass that kind of set up some bigger things down the road where you end up winning that game. And I think Rodney Thomas out of Yale has just played himself into a long-term role with the Colts in just 1 year, and that's super impressive.
Yeah, Rodney Thomas for me as well, and it's just about the only option. Like you said, Nick Cross just has not been a factor. For my money, I actually just published something on this at horseshoehuddle.com. I have Cross as one of my young guys that I really want to see more from in these last 4 games. But yeah, Rodney Thomas stepped in when no one on the outside really expected anything. In the preseason, I saw this guy's a really good tackler, and if nothing else, he's going to be able to bring guys down. But in Yale, he missed a season due to COVID. He was a cornerback for a while. He was a linebacker for a while. And then he gets to the NFL and is now playing safety. So not only did he acclimate to the NFL quickly, he acclimated at a different position than he was previously used to playing. So awesome job by him. Free safety of the future, I would imagine. If the Colts look at it 5 years from now, they probably want it to be Rodney Thomas and Nick Cross as their starting safeties. Thomas has just blown away expectations. The last one we'll cover for this, and we might finally have a difference on this one, Breakout Player of the Year.
Yeah, so this was one of the options where it was hard to pick somebody because there were so many options that I think you could have went with. So hopefully we don't go the same person here. I went Zaire Franklin. I think Zaire Franklin has just put himself into this is a starting caliber linebacker in the NFL. Whereas years past, people would use the word special teams ace, special teams leader, vocal leader, can play in spot play when Shaquille isn't able to make it. The Colts defense in years past, you could tell when Shaquille Leonard wasn't on the field and when he was. Because this level of play would just drop significantly weeks that he couldn't make it out there. And for a guy like Shaquille who's missed so much time over the years, like that is not sustainable. So to see this season where essentially you don't have Shaquille Leonard the entire year almost, Zaire Franklin and Bobby Okereke, who I should mention as well, has blown away those expectations and just been a solid linebacker duo themselves without the notable star linebacker in the room. And Zaire Franklin's going to end the year in that top 5 of tackles. I believe he's 3rd right now. He's 2nd in solo tackles in the league. So I'm happy for Zaire. There's very few better people on an NFL roster than Zaire Franklin. I mean, we both had the privilege of speaking with Zaire multiple times as well, but super excited for Zaire's future career. And that contract they gave him this offseason is looking like a discount. I don't know about you, Jake.
Yeah, no doubt. And maybe this team is a little more predictable than we thought because that's my guy too. Another guy it came down to is Isaiah Rodgers. But I just don't think he has the total body of work for me to say, like, he's had a breakout star year this year. I think he could be, if given the opportunity to play extensively. But no, what Zaire Franklin has done has been really impressive. Before the season, before we knew that Shaquille Leonard's season was going to be totally derailed with all this, the back stuff, if you would have said that Zaire Franklin was going to be the starting Mike all year, I would have been like, it's a little... I would have maybe got shades of, some 2010s Colts with, John Bostic and Dequel Jackson, those guys in there. But that has not been the case. He's taken some small lumps. There's been a couple plays he's given up, but when you look at the growth of like him and Bobby Okereke and EJ Speed, really, from the beginning of the season in Gus Bradley's scheme to now, it's night and day. It looked very much like a work in progress early on, but these guys have almost mastered the system, it seems like, to the point where Zach and I talked multiple times on here that when Shaquille Leonard was getting back into the lineup, it's like, man, you really don't want to see them take Zaire or Bobby off the field because they've both been playing at a really high level. Like you mentioned, Franklin will be top 5 in tackles. He's right up there, number 2 or 3 right now. He's been a really good run defender, especially, which was not going to be surprising to us. But I've just been pleasantly surprised at his whole body of work. I haven't watched him play and be like, God, they gotta get someone else in there. Like, that just hasn't been the case.
It's really funny to look back on that training camp scuffle between Zaire Franklin and Jamal Williams, where both, for lack of better words, were calling each other trash, and they both would go on to have career years.
Who would have known? Yeah, Jamal Williams with a zillion rushing touchdowns this year, and Zaire. Yeah, so Jamal Williams probably going to lead the league in rushing touchdowns. Franklin could lead in tackles. No one would have thought that in August. So, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Apparently, we need more training camp scuffles, apparently.
Yeah. Well, shoot, hopefully you guys made a bet on one of those things before the season, because this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, obviously you do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And our show today is also brought to you by Built Bar. All right, so I got to talk to you guys about something serious real quick. All right, let's talk about Built Bar's new reimagined flavors, guys. Cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper, which is a mix, as well as white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Christmas time. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. First off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built Bars before, they're literally the best tasting protein bars ever built. They're revolutionizing nutrition as we know it with 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low sugar and calories. Just 130 of them. You're probably wondering which flavor is my favorite. Well, that's an unanswerable question to say the least. They're all unbelievable. And they're all different, so you can order a mixed box and try all 5 new flavors for yourself if you want to. Built, you got to try this. Get 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Okay, awards are out the door. We're moving on to some new stuff. 4 games left on the season. The NFL, for whatever reason, decided to put the Colts on national TV once again. So now they have 2 nationally televised games in their final 4. They are at the Vikings next weekend on NFL Network. That's Saturday at 1 o'clock. They then got the Los Angeles Chargers at home on Monday Night Football. They then travel to New York to take on the Giants, and then they finish off at home against the Texans. So, again, this is an optimistic episode. So, Destin, you can start one. We'll go, kind of riff off each other here. What is something that you were looking forward to seeing in these last 4 weeks?
I'm pretty excited for just these young guys just to kind of get more experience either way. I'll be a little bit more specific, though. I'm going to look at the tight end room. I think Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson both have the ability to be difference makers now and the future. I think when you see Jelani Woods get the ball in space, like big things just happen. And when you target Jelani Woods, good things happen. I have been a big Mo Alley Cox guy in the past, and I understand why they signed him this offseason. I even agreed with it at the time. But I think the time has come, especially with where this year is, where the snaps in the tight end room need to be dominated by Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson, especially when Wally Cox isn't blocking well either. So I'd rather at least get Jelani Woods more accustomed with the blocking side of it and just start getting those two as the duo in the tight end room of the future. If that's how you see it, then I think it's time that you make that decision now.
Yeah, I mean, when you got the young Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez duo in the house, you just got to go with that, don't you? uh, no, not that far. But I mean, you're right. I mean, again, that's something I just wrote about. You know, they lost Jack Doyle, and I think they hoped Mo could be a diet version of that, and it just really hasn't worked. His blocking has not been up to par, especially his run blocking. And I mean, Woods's grades there are just as bad. They're even a little worse. So it's like if you got one guy who is far surpassed in the receiving game and the blocking is relatively the same, just throw the guy out there that's the physical freak with still a ton of room to grow. So I would definitely put Woods out there as I don't know. So he got 20% of the snaps against last week, and I just don't get that. So they've got to beef that up. He needs to be playing quite a bit. Granson as well. I don't think they've made either of those guys enough of a priority in certain games, and we need to see a tight end heavy offense moving forward. Something I said I was looking forward to in these final four games. There's some fun matchups against opponents in this one. You've got Justin Jefferson coming up, Justin Herbert. You're gonna have a whole game with him. Saquon Barkley. So there's some potentially fun ones here, especially Saquon Barkley, for example. Jonathan Taylor versus Barkley. That just seems like a really fun matchup. They're guys that can do some similar things. They're both powerful, really elusive, and I just think that's going to be a fun slate to watch. I mean, we're not expecting wins anymore, so it's like, why not just have fun watching some of the opponents as well?
Yeah, we're not just not rooting. It's like we're not even rooting for wins anymore. It's just a whole entire different mindset on it. But some of the matchups are fun, unless you have Saquon Barkley in fantasy, because I believe that one's going to be right in the fantasy playoffs. So Barkley going against Grover Stewart in this run defense. If you have Barkley in your lineups, I'm praying for you.
But you have to have him out there. I mean,
you got
fantasy championship, you can't not. Yeah,
you can't bench him.
Yeah. So this also is a good time since the team's not really going to be winning to stat watch. You got Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. both knocking on 1,000 yards again. Taylor's at 861 rushing yards, so he just needs 139 more in 4 games. If he doesn't get that, that would just be outlandish. Michael Pittman Jr. sitting at 755. Now, he should get it, but his is a little more risky because the passing game has just been doo-doo lately, and he's had some low performances as well. Not individually, but just statistically. You know what I mean? Not that he's had bad performances, but the numbers just haven't been there because the passing game is just rough. So yeah, looking forward to seeing those guys get 1,000 again.
Another one I think that I'm looking forward to this last 4 is there's a lot of notable free agents on this team that are either going to play their way elsewhere or maybe play their way onto this team. I mean, there's a lot of question marks through this last 4 of who's even going to be making the decisions roster-wise next season for the Colts. So a lot of question marks there. But, I mean, just to read off a few of these free agents, I mean, we have Yannick Ngakoue is going to be a free agent this offseason after the trade that sent him here, sending away Rock Ya-Sin. Everyone's favorite tackle/guard, Matt Pryor, is going to be hitting the market. Same with fan favorite corner, Brandon Faison. But then, in all seriousness, multiple key guys this season. Rodney McLeod has been a pretty solid signing for the Colts this past year, who could move in the younger safety area. They'll have 3 on the roster next year that are a little bit younger than Rodney McLeod. But Rodney McLeod has played himself another contract elsewhere or here. Ashton Doolin has had some bright moments this year. Paris Campbell, who we mentioned earlier, is on a contract year where he's not been able to stay healthy up until this season, which has been in many ways a contract year. And then the guy who's probably going to warrant the most money on the open market of any of our free agents, we have Bobby Okereke, who I don't know about you, Jake, but I have been back and forth countless times on how are we going to keep him.
Yeah, and if you're wondering why, it seems obvious you would want to keep him. Shaquille Leonard is already tied into 20+ million per year, and Okereke is going to sniff a 12 million, 15. Like, he's a very productive player, young player, still ascending. So he's going to be handed a boatload of money, I'm sure. And to have that much money tied up into a linebacker group, because the linebackers are kind of known as a non-essential position group. They can be playmakers and difference makers, but you don't really win and lose because of them. So to have that much money tied into that position group would be a little iffy. So how can you bring back both players with that big of a cap hit between them is the big issue. And that's just going to be so tough. And man, you don't want to see Shaquille Leonard really go anywhere, but like his health might dictate that for him. If the Colts have a new general manager in the house, that might make the decision making easier. Because Chris Ballard is emotionally tied to a lot of these guys, and he's not going to want to just send off guys for nothing, So that would be something to monitor. Something else I had. Final 4 games, you got a healthy Kwity Paye now, bye week hitting at the perfect time. His race for 10 sacks. He's at 5 right now, but he's been really productive. Considering how much time he's missed to have 5 sacks, he could really flip a switch and turn it on. 4 games to get 5 more sacks and hit 10 on the season. I hope he gets at least one in this next game so we can start the counter.
It'd be interesting. I mean, because then if he can get to 10 and then Yannick can get to 10, this would be the first time in a long time that the Colts have two players with 10 sacks on the season. I mean, getting one player with 10 sacks has been difficult over years past.
Yeah, that's been a chore. And Ngakoue is, of course, at 8.5. So he's had, 6 or 7 games with at least a half, so he should get there. My final point was Week 18 is against the Texans at home and not the Jaguars.
That is a big one. That is a big one to make note of. Also, for all the tank enthusiasts, by that week, you would think Houston has indeed locked up that number 1 pick. So it'd be interesting to see a team in Houston that hasn't. I don't want to say they're actually tanking because who knows in the NFL anyway, but they will have no incentives to not win that game. So we should get a Houston team that is fully motivated and fully ready and wanting to build onto next season. So that should be a more competitive game than people think.
Yeah, and for fans who are anti-tank and they want to see the Colts win still, that could be a good game for you too because the recipe is there for the Colts to house that game. It's at home, Week 18. They've done some really nice things in Week 18s before. Very weak opponent. Texans are arguably the worst team in the league. So that could be one where the Colts actually wipe the floor with an opponent for once this year. So that will be something good to see. Anything else you got for us today?
Nothing that I can think of specifically. I would say that the thing to watch for that I had wrote down that we didn't mention for the last 4 weeks is I don't know if anyone's heard, but the Colts may or may not have an opening at the head coach position at the end of the season. A lot of notable names across the league that you can be watching these last 4, and then multiple that could even see the playoffs. I would suggest watching that Philadelphia team. They're going to have a couple candidates that people could be seeing through the market. Detroit Lions have an offensive coordinator named Ben Johnson that I think is going to get a lot of traction this offseason. One Ken Dorsey, who has, if you've probably seen the video where he has a little bit of an attitude when things are going wrong there in Buffalo as the offensive coordinator. Lots of guys just to watch across the league and just start to building a little bit of names in your head of people you'd like to be the head coach of Indianapolis next year.
I'm glad you mentioned that because Zach actually just wrote a master list of 12 really intriguing head coaching options for the Colts to look at. So I expect that to be kind of a high traffic item for the next month or two until the Colts find their guy. So horseshoehuddle.com. Again, Zach put out a dozen candidates for you guys. And with that, I think that's it for us today. Stay tuned this week because we've still got more great guests on tap for you. Zach will be back with us as well. Make sure to follow Destin at the Destin Adams on Twitter and subscribe to the Saddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. They put out episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, yeah?
Yep, every Tuesday and Thursday. We're recording one that will be out the same day this one's coming out.
Ooh, perfect. Okay. So go ahead and follow them and follow us at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd also love your ratings and reviews as well if they're nice. If they're mean, just don't worry about it. Just stay home. And thank you guys for making us your first listen of the day again. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. That's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys tomorrow.